hyperventilation, hypoxia, and hypocapnia. Hyperventilation is defined simply as breathing more than one's body demands. Hyperventilation is not the same as having a fast and deep respiratory rate, such as when running or performing a strenuous task. When active, it is normal that our respiration rate and depth increase. However, when performing a strenuous task, someone might still be hyperventilating if they are breathing at a faster and deeper rate than they need. For example, there can be a tendency to hyperventilate when running with an open mouth. Hyperventilation interferes with the body's natural regulation of breathing by exhausting too much carbon dioxide. This is termed hypocapnia. Hypocapnia is defined as a decrease in blood carbon dioxide. According to the Bohr effect, hyperventilation decreases the efficiency of breathing. This is because carbon dioxide is acidic. Decreased levels of CO2 increases blood pH, strengthening the affinity between hemoglobin and oxygen. Thus, oxygen is not able to efficiently diffuse from red blood cells into the body's tissues, including the brain, organs, and muscles. Conversely, when carbon dioxide levels increase, acidity increases in the bloodstream. This weakens the affinity between oxygen and hemoglobin. Oxygen is more able to diffuse from red blood cells into tissues. The intention of the Embodied Presence practice series is not to exponentially increase carbon dioxide levels in the body, which would be dangerous. Rather, the intention is to support optimal levels of both oxygen and carbon dioxide so breathing is optimally efficient. Hypoxia is defined as a deficiency in the amount of oxygen reaching the tissues. This can be caused by chronic breathing disorders or dysfunctional breathing patterns, such as mouth breathing. Hyperventilation practices, such as the traditional Kapalabhati pranayama practice, are both hypoxic and hypocapnic, as are the popular Wim Hof breathing practices. In these practices, there is a reduction in carbon dioxide and oxygen levels. The exhausting of excess carbon dioxide decreases blood pH, increasing the affinity between hemoglobin and oxygen, decreasing the efficiency of oxygen diffusion into the tissues. When doing hyperventilation breathing practices, you may feel lightheaded and tingling in the fingers. This is a signal of deficiency of oxygen in the tissues and should be undertaken with extreme care. These practices do not increase oxygenation as it is often claimed. They may cause people to faint due to low oxygenation. For this reason, they should not be practiced near water or in any situation where you could fall and bang your head. People have died doing these practices. This is because hyperventilation exhausts too much carbon dioxide from the body. The chemoreceptors that measure pH and control respiration do not signal that there is any need to breathe fresh air into the body. The respiration rate slows too much. The body continues to metabolize what remaining oxygen is in the bloodstream. The tissues are already in a hypoxic state. Then the person passes out. If this happens underwater by people undertaking hyperventilation type breathing exercises, it is extremely dangerous. Hyperventilation practices have been practiced for thousands of years and do have some benefits. For example, the practice Kapalabhati reverses how we normally breathe. The exhalation is active and the inhalation passive. This can cultivate awareness and help break down dysfunctional patterns of breathing. Hyperventilation practices stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-flight response. Research shows that this can trigger adaptive responses, improving immune function. Based upon this understanding of what happens during hyperventilation practices, some teachers have adapted Kapalabhati and similar practices to much slower and gentle rhythms, allowing time between short rounds and including breath holds following exhalations so that carbon dioxide levels can normalize. It is worth considering that these practices were developed when the world was a very different place than it is today. Arguably, the complexity of our modern lifestyles require practices that support increased parasympathetic rather than sympathetic arousal. The practices we undertake in this training are hypoxic and hypercapnic in that there is an increase in carbon dioxide and there can be a momentary reduction in blood oxygen. Following breath holds, your students may experience around 10% reduction in oxygen saturation in the bloodstream, which quickly recovers when the breath hold is released. The breath holds increase carbon dioxide levels in the body, which improves diffusion of oxygen into the tissues. As a result of chronic stress or dysfunctional breathing patterns such as mouth breathing, the neural structures that control respiration can become hypersensitive to carbon dioxide levels. When this happens, the breathing centers in the brain unnecessarily signal increases in respiration depth and frequency, i.e. hyperventilation. The practices in this series have a long-term trait effect in improving breathing efficiency because they recalibrate the parts of the brain that measure carbon dioxide levels in the bloodstream. While the practices in this series are much safer than the hyperventilation type practices, nonetheless they must also be approached with caution. Breath holding practices are not suitable for pregnant women nor people with underlying chronic health conditions. For people with chronic neurological, respiratory or cardiovascular conditions, they must consult a medical professional before engaging in these practices, especially if any of the practices involve breath holds. The practices in this breathwork series generally stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. For this reason, they are generally experienced as calming and restoring a sense of presence and well-being.